that it's going to be a useful session and an informative session. I'm just going to share my screen now just to go through a few introductory slides, and then I'll introduce our speakers and we can get going. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen there. Is that right? Great. Okay. Thanks, Cliff. Yeah, so let me just go on to slideshow. So quality in construction, lunch and learn, we're going to be going for 75 minutes. It's only 60 minutes. It's only an hour, these lunch and learns. But we've decided to give you an early Easter present, if you like, with an extra 15 minutes of learning and content on this important topic, quality in construction. So we should finish no later than 2:15. As I say, my job is Programs Manager for the Supply Chain Sustainability School. So I work very closely with National Highways, their key supplier partners, and the full supply chain to support companies get better at sustainability on an individual level as well as organisational level. So we're really pleased that we are now, through the school, able to provide learning on why the issues connected to that core sustainability theme. So this session's about quality. We also do sessions on operational excellence, on lean, on modern methods of construction, on digital, etc. So the school very much now is not just about that core mission of sustainability, but very much other factors that enable better performance on that imperative. Participate if you can through the session. Please use the chat function and the Q&A function as well, and we'll try and get through as many of those as possible. Share your views, share your comments, ask questions of the expert speakers that we've got lined up to share their knowledge this afternoon, and hopefully you'll get more out of it in that way. I think the session's being recorded as well, so hopefully you don't have a problem with that. If you do have a problem, you're welcome to leave, but hopefully we'll be able to get it all recorded and edited and the link provided to everybody who's on the call. So you don't need to make a huge amount of notes as we work through, because you'll get the recording link and you'll also get a PDF copy of these slides also. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of interaction as well, nothing too scary. Hopefully we're going to be using Menti throughout the session. So this is just forewarning. If you have got your phone handy, that's great, because you'll probably need it to get onto Menti and use that poll code, but more of that later on. You just go to menti.com and type in that code, and then you'll be able to participate in some of the polling that we're going to be doing as part of this lunch and learn. So as I say, more of that later. We haven't got any questions now, but we'll come up onto that. Our agenda, before I pass across, pleased to welcome 4 speakers who've joined us this afternoon. We've got Rob Andrews, who's the Head of Quality for National Highways, Head of Quality Design and Standards. I'll get Rob's full portfolio and job title correct. Thanks for joining us, Rob. We've also got Cliff Smith, who's the Executive Director of the Get It Right Initiative, or GIRI for short. Cliff's going to be our first speaker, so he's going to share his experience working in that position for many years on the importance of getting it right and how that feeds into the broader quality agenda. Then we've got one of Cliff's disciples, if you like, Lyndon Hayworth, Head of Assurance at Galliford Try, key contractor for National Highways. Lyndon heads up their assurance unit within Galliford Try, and Lyndon's kindly joining us also this afternoon to talk about his experience of adopting the GIRI methodology and learning from that. We've also got Emma Murnahan, Head of Innovation at Graham. Emma's joining us again to talk about GIRI itself, particularly with a view to the future, what the experience has told us to date and how that's being used to revise, edit where necessary, amend where necessary, and feed in learning to continue improving the work of GIRI and how that's supporting the industry. Hopefully we'll have time towards the end for Q&A as well, but please feel free to drop those in as we go through. Okay, before I pass across just very quickly. I'll probably put these into the chat as well if we get a chance. These are the learning pathways that we now have on the school's website. So just a very quick advertorial, if you like, that these are, we're adding new content to these specific learning pathways that we're creating for the National Highways supply chain every week at the moment. We've got one on quality, which ties in with today's learning. We've also got several new pathways on productivity and operational excellence and connected issues around that as well. So if you go onto the Supply Chain School website, look for National Highways, get onto their pages, you'll find all of that content there. We'll put links in the chat as we go through. Okay, that's out of the way. I'm going to pass on to Rob, first of all, Head of Quality, Design and Standards at National Highways, to introduce and say a few words. Rob, thanks for joining.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'll just clarify, my job title is Head of Quality for Design and Standards. And that for is it may sound semantics, but that's really important, that for, otherwise I end up with a lot more responsibility I don't want. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. And one more. So yeah, thanks for joining today, everyone. Yeah, good afternoon. So I want to start off by just giving a bit of background about kind of the journey that National Highways has been on with regard to quality recently and how we got to where we are, and then a little bit about some of the really important areas for us, sort of for the next stage of what we're trying to achieve. So a few years ago, about 2021, National Highways decided that we really needed to understand better how we were managing quality within ourselves and within our supply chain. Obviously, lots of really important work done by Giri in looking at what the costs of quality were, and we didn't feel really that we were in the right space for looking at that and for improving it. We can see there 10 to 25% of project costs, and we didn't think that we were quite giving that the seriousness that it needed. So we got some independent expertise in to do a quality maturity assessment for National Highways. And it was a really thorough piece of work. I did an excellent job in talking to a huge number of people from right the way across the supply chain and internally, site visits, reviewing loads and loads of the kind of information and data there was, and then doing some deep dives into a few of our schemes, but also into some specific assets and types of work to give us a really clear picture of where we were and how we were performing in this area. And part of the way they articulated that was against a maturity matrix that they used. And you can see that at the bottom, and it put us there at 1.8, right down in the basic level. And what they were saying there is it's not something to panic about. It's not a disaster, but there's quite a lot of scope there to do better. And other organizations were doing better and were much higher up that maturity. So there were some good opportunities to learn and to see that it is possible for us to do more than we're doing and get some of the benefits from that. So if we could go on to the next slide. And they really helped us to clarify the links between better quality and some of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Obviously, savings. It's quite obvious to say that you can make significant savings if you're not having to do that rework and go back out and redo things. Better for the customer. There's less disruption as we have to maybe reclose roads and put traffic management on to deal with things. Obviously, safer. We don't have people going back out on the network to fix stuff, and we know from all sorts of data that the risks with the safety risks with rework are higher than when you're going out in maybe a full scheme closure to do the work originally. And obviously significant benefits for carbon potentially if we can improve this and reduce the rework and having to do things over again. And the report really helped us to kind of explicitly draw the links that we kind of knew. We knew logically that this was the case and there were these benefits to go after, but it really drew the picture about why it's worth changing our focus and putting a lot more effort into this area. Next slide, please. So one of the recommendations, in fact, the first recommendation was you need to talk about quality at a senior level in a far more structured and routine way. At the moment, or as we were in the past, big quality issues tended to only get elevated up to an exec level when something really went wrong. So significant incidents had occurred, and that would make it onto the radar. But it wasn't a part of the routine conversations in the same way that a program might be, and spend and safety in particular. So that was recommendation number one, was change that. And Our executive responded to that very quickly. And what used to be our safety and health committee became safety, health, environment, and quality. And that's the whole of our exec getting together every month to talk about those topics. And they really do go into some detail and pay it really a good level of attention. And as part of that, we created our National Highways Quality Charter that you can see a picture of there on the left there. Agreed and signed off by our chief exec. It's available to go onto all of your notice boards on your schemes and work areas as your client's kind of ambition for quality. And we can share that afterwards. And alongside that, our exec were key that we didn't just disappear off somewhere for 3 years and write a strategy and then come back and present it to them. They gave us 5 short-term priority actions, things that we could start to focus on now that would make a difference in the short term and really start to get things moving. And I won't go into a huge detail, but I'll quickly run through what those 5 areas are, and we're working on those as we speak. So the first one was they want us to report significant quality incidents into our executive every month. So we've defined what a significant quality incident is and created a process for reporting those and capturing the information. And we're starting to report those up now. So they've seen a good sort of 30 or so significant quality incidents reported into SHEC that they could discuss, and they can start to understand and get a picture of what's going on. The second one was around changing the way that we program our resurfacing. So currently we do quite a lot of resurfacing in winter months, colder months, even though we know that has an impact on the quality of what we do and the duration, the lifespan. So why do we do that? Why have we not responded to this sooner? And that was directly from our chief exec saying, I don't want us to do any planned resurfacing in those months. Now we've moved and shifted a little bit from that. And what we're saying now is we want to better understand how we make sure anything we do in the winter months is of the same quality as the work that we do the rest of the year. So how do we understand what the impacts are and only do the work when we can assure the quality rather than just doing it and then fixing it later? And then the third priority is around understanding the interim lifespan of the asset. How do we measure how well our asset is performing during its lifespan? Okay, we can have a look and see the quality of what we build, and then we understand the maintenance and the life duration, whole of life of the asset. But if we want to go and look at it after a year, how do we understand whether it's performing in a way that fits with what ought to be the lifespan? And we're looking in particular at the moment about road markings. So we lay the road markings. How can we go back and see whether they're performing in the way they should be performing, in a shorter term rather than just over a longer time span? And we need to think about how we apply that to other assets as well, but that's our starting point. Point number 4 there was around having some sort of recognition. So we now have a National Highways Quality Award as part of the National Highways Awards, and Morgan Sindel won that award in its first year, so they did a great job there, and that's something that we'll be having every year. But also within that priority, we're thinking about how we incentivize quality in our supply chain as well. So how do we drive the right behaviors, and how do we make sure we're properly recognizing and rewarding where people are doing particular things to improve quality? How do we leverage kind of our influence to drive the right behaviors in quality in the same way that we have done with safety? And then the 5th priority is around the inspection routine regimes. So do we have the right inspection going on in schemes? And the idea of having an independent works examiner, independent of the suppliers, of the design and so on, who can look at that work and actually do that assessment, rather than it being the kind of self-certified model that we have at the moment, which we know brings in different risks. So that's a piece of work. Again, we're starting up trials on a couple of schemes with the idea of having that independent works examiner, defining a role far more clearly, defining what the outcomes of that role ought to be, and seeing if that can make a difference to what we see on the schemes and in the work as well. So that's our kind of 5 priorities. If you could go on to the next slide, please. And obviously, we're not doing this in isolation. So we've established as a subgroup of the collaboration board, a supplier quality group with representatives from those organisations. And there's others as well who kind of come and play a part in various parts of it, but that's the core group that we have. So we're really trying to work in tandem with suppliers at all levels. It's the only way we're going to make a difference on this. And we've been really heartened by the input that we've had and the progress that we've made, by involving all of these groups and having those good conversations. It's been very, very open, and it's already brought a huge lot to the work that we're doing. And then linked in with that, obviously, a lot of work with the supply chain school, another area of excellent support for what we're doing. You can see we've got some National Highways quality e-learning there, and there'll be links to that, so you can go and have a look at that. That's on there. And we're using as a starting point to expand that quality pathway, the quality route way. So the kind of the training and the information that you need in order to go in the direction that we're trying to move things, that'll be available to you as well. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit of background about the range of things that we're working on at the moment, and just highlighting how important this is going to be moving into for the rest of this roads period and into the next roads period. But I want to pick up on a particular area just for the last bit of what we're talking about here. So I mentioned that we were now defining and raising significant quality incidents. So anybody on one of our schemes, internal, external, supply chain, tier 1, tier 2, would have access to this form, and where they spot something that's a significant quality incident, they should be able to raise that. And we'd look at it and triage it and assess whether we think it is or not. But anyone should be able to do that in the same way as anyone can raise a safety incident. So there'll be a link to the form. Anyone can go in where they see something that matches those criteria, or they think matches that criteria, that can be reported in. And we're starting to see these coming through, some really interesting significant quality incidents, and some of them quite surprising, some of the things that we're seeing. But we're starting to learn a bit more about some of the things that are happening out there. And it's a positive thing. It's not, you raise a significant quality incident and someone comes out and shouts at you about it. We're very much trying to do this we know these things are out there, and we want to encourage people to be visible about raising them so that we can understand and we can start to get better. So it's never going to be a negative thing where you report a significant quality incident. It's always going to be in an open way and about learning and encouraging openness with quality. But a part of the learning from doing this is we see a significant quality incident, but they don't come from nowhere. We don't do everything right and then have something really, really significant go wrong. And we felt that there was a gap in our understanding of the kind of the early warnings for significant quality incidents. So what we should be seeing is the non-conformances and the defects, and then the significant quality incidents being kind of the small proportion at the top of that. But we didn't feel we really had the right level of visibility about the things that are going on underneath the surface. And that's why we kind of moved on to the next stage of this. So we can go on to the next slide. So we've developed and are in the process of introducing our quality performance system. So this is about trying to corral the information that's already out there into building a bit more intelligence, strategic intelligence about where the key quality issues are for our sector. And this is about trying to capture more detail around non-conformances, defects, and so on and so forth, and actually look at that in a wider way. So at the moment, every scheme will be raising non-conformances, and potentially every scheme will be capturing information on defects. But currently, it's impossible for us to take all of that data and have a look at what the bigger picture is. We can say within an individual scheme what's happening and where the most common causes of quality issues are. But what we can't do is add up all of that data into the bigger picture about, okay, as a sector, what should we be focusing on? What's the cost of these things? And that's where we're trying to develop this system of reporting. We're aligning it with things like the collaborative performance framework and so on and so forth, as I'll say in a moment. But one of the interesting questions here was, how long, excuse me, as a sector, how long have we been recording non-conformances? I mean, it must be a number of years. So there's a huge amount of data there going back however many years, where every scheme will have a register of all the non-conformances on their scheme. So how easy is it for us to say what's changed over the last 5 years in the non-conformances, in the quality issues that we see on our schemes at that kind of granular level? We've got years worth of data we've been collecting, but actually we're not using it. We're not getting the benefit of all that activity that goes in on every scheme, capturing these bits of information. And we're really still only focusing on using it at a scheme by scheme level. So if we can go on to the next slide. So these are some of the challenges that we're trying to tackle. That when you look at for capturing of quality issues on schemes. Every scheme gets to design its own data format, method of capturing this. Slightly different data is captured from scheme to scheme. There's different interpretations of what we might mean by a non-conformance or a defect. We tend to all use different language when we're talking about the root causes that we have, and there's not very much standardization around that. Excuse me. There's different environments, different motivations. You know, some schemes want to capture as many non-conformances as they can. Other schemes might want to try and deal with things in-house before they actually record them. Lots of different approaches to how we assess the cost or impact of the quality issues. And kind of underlining all of that, none of it's very well aligned to the National Highways performance metrics for our suppliers. So that's kind of what we're trying to tackle, and some of the important things that we're trying to do for our next stage of improving quality maturity in National Highways and across its supply chain. How can we start to standardize some of these things? So instead of having a picture of what's happening on individual schemes, we've got a really good picture of what's happening and how things are progressing across the whole of our operations and major projects, smart motorways, and so on. So that's what we're going to be working on and developing with our supply chain for the rest of RIS 2 and into roads period 3, getting better at using all the intelligence that we're already capturing to direct us to where we can best make the improvements. And that will all align with the benefits that we're trying to get. You can see at the top there, making it safer, improvements for our customer, better carbon outcomes, saving money off the RIS period settlement we've got. All of these challenges we've got to try and tackle. And that's why we'll be working with our suppliers to get better at gathering the data and the intelligence you already have so that we can measure and make the right improvements and focus on the right areas. So I think that was, I'm not sure if I'm to time or not, but I think that was all I had to say. So really, are we doing questions now, or are we going to kind of hold them over to the end? What's our process?
Sorry, just unmute myself. I think we'll carry them over until the end, if that's okay, Rob.
Absolutely fine by me. I'll be here.
Yeah, no problem, because we've got quite a lot to get through. Thank you very much. Perfect introduction. And Cliff, you are next up, and I understand that you're going to share your own slides, and you've got some polling on Menti to put to the audience for people to be able to share their knowledge and go through some of that information as well. So I'll pass straight across to yourself, Cliff.
Is everyone seeing that? I hope. Good afternoon. Oops, excuse me. I'm Cliff Smith. I'm the Executive Director of GIRI. I'm a Fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and I've been in the constructing the benefits of an error-free strategy and then outline what GIRI is doing to try and effect the changes the industry needs. In 2015, we carried out a research project in which we were looking to establish what is the root cause of error and how much do we waste as an industry. We had contributions from many organisations, and we were willing to share what the information they had, and this is what we found. The direct cost of error. This is what you see on a sort of daily basis, the NCRs and the tablet records and the things that Rob talking about, and the resources involved in specifically correcting the error at 5%. But the importance here is the indirect cost of error. The 7% there is resources used in follow-on work or the impact on other parties, particularly in terms of delay and disruption. And then the 6% unrecorded process waste. This is errors which are made and they're hidden or corrected without being recorded. And then we unfortunately have 3%, this latent defects, which are discovered after handover of an asset. Now, profitability in construction obviously varies, but we're probably hovering at around 2 or 3% of turnover. And so we can quickly see that the spend on putting things right is an order of magnitude higher. And even if there are some questions about the accuracy of the findings, there is a clear imperative to avoid error. Now we come to this Menti poll. And what I'd like you to do, if you could connect with Menti, is to consider which area of construction do you think we spend the most money? Where is the most money spent in correcting errors? You know, you've got your M&E, or you've got your concrete, or you've got steel, or so forth. I'm going to stop sharing and let the Menti take over. And please could you join in and say what you think the areas of construction with the costliest mistakes occur.
Yeah, so just to remind, thanks, Cliff. I'll just remind people as I share the details. It's menti.com. People will need to go to on their mobile phones. Go to www.menti.com on your browser, and the code you need to type in.
First.
I think a few people have
the
done it
root
already.
causes one up. Sorry, that's the one.
That's it, yeah. And for those who aren't yet in Menti, you can see the code there that you will type in as soon as you're in menti.com, 48996168. It's on the screen now. I'll show up now.
That's an interesting one coming up in the center there, the mistakes in design. I'm not sure. I suppose you could assess those as things which have an impact later, can't you? But concrete's featuring there. Will's brothers, whoever they are, or is that Will's brother? Anyway, we're getting a good spread. I've got the mechanical coming in there. Yes, I think we're getting the picture here. So if I now thanks for that contribution. We'll now start my screen share again. And this is what our research found. So the highest was concrete. Well, I suppose that's not a big surprise because concrete is, we use a lot of concrete, don't we? Mechanical systems, facades and cladding. I certainly found creating watertight buildings always seemed to be a particular challenge. The M&E, I suppose it was more the crushing of the M&E commissioning period to achieve completion dates that often resulted in difficulties. But you can see that the research picked up on numerous items that you would put forward in the Menti there. These are the cost areas. So now we're going to move on and think about the root causes. And I think you were coming up with that design item in the cost of error. But let's now think about what are the roots of these errors. We're now going to go to Menti again and ask you to think about where those roots of the errors are. Where do they come? What causes the error to occur? So if you could use the poll again, this time on the likely root causes. Failure to get a plan, planning, lack of training. Weather being the root cause of an error. Interesting. Design, time, value engineering. I like the rushed work one. That's sometimes a consequence of planning. Failure to get a plan. Communications got a mention. Design's in there again. Poor management. Over purchasing. I'm guessing over purchasing means keep on buying till you get a lower price. Well, interestingly, planning sticking well to the centre there. So that's obviously getting a good vote. Let's now. So we've got communication mentioned and programming and planning. Let's now look at what were the results of our research. So these were the root causes of error as discovered by the GIRI research. And the number one root cause was inadequate planning, as you picked out, a number of you picked out there. And this is not just
sorry, Cliff, you're just on presenter view there within PowerPoint, so we're seeing the sort of commentary, but not the visual.
Right.
Just in case you have any notes that are going to compromise.
No.
We're looking at your notes,
which is this one, so it should be the one. I'll try again. What's happened here? Is that any better?
Yes. Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
So these are the root causes of error: inadequate planning, and this is not just the macro planning, that sort of sense, overall project planning, but that sort of micro planning, which is the day-to-day planning of what activities are going to be going on. So that planning is really important. Design features in 6 of the items on the list, and that's clearly an area for attention, along with communication, culture, very important to quality, and then there are the financial and time pressures and ineffective communication. So a number of those were picked up in the poll. I'd like to now just talk for a moment about the GIRI was set up originally to look specifically at productivity. We'll come to the other benefits in a while, but in terms of productivity, the reasoning, the sort of context for the GIRI philosophy, we need to understand this definition of productivity. Now, efficiency is related to the output over the input, and we're all familiar with that sort of efficiency drive. But there's also effectiveness, and this is where we refer to the quality or the value or the scale of the outputs. So you must have an understanding that the quality of what you're producing is important to your productivity. There's no real value in efficiently producing the wrong thing. So let's get it right, and then you can improve productivity. So just a quick recap on the summary root causes of error. There's culture, planning, design, and supervision. But let's not forget, there's also human tragedy associated with construction errors and associated defects. There was a forum last year led by a railway accident inspection board. He came to the GIRI webinar and reported on the Carmont rail disaster, which we can see up here on the right. And then Dave and Judith Hackett's report following the Grenfell disaster was scathing about attitudes and culture in the industry, and particularly that sort of corrosive effect of lowest cost procurement. We're all responsible for this in the industry collectively for what happens, and whilst the new Building Safety Act will go some way towards addressing this, it's a cultural issue. And we can see the impact of cultural change in the industry when we look at safety. back in 2003. The very poor safety record in the industry was challenged by John Prescott, who was then Deputy PM. And this was backed up by a focus on compliance with terms of health and safety legislation. Initially, an improvement was noted through an attitude of minimum to comply, but improvement on that basis soon plateaued. And it was only through the cultural change that followed that the transformation took place to deliver the safer sites that we see today. Now, the Building Safety Act has the potential to have the same impact on the drive for behavioural change in terms of quality, but quality behaviour needs this same cultural change if the same outcome is to be achieved. And this is what GIRI are dedicated to. And we were established following the original research as a not-for-profit organisation, membership-based, with the strategic aim of improving industry productivity. And we became a limited company in 2017. The research demonstrated this link between error elimination and productivity. And of course, this helped to convince businesses in the industry as to the benefits of investing in a zero error program. But the world's changing and boardrooms are now recognizing the broader range of imperatives they need to satisfy, including safety, sustainability, and quality. And an error-free strategy provides a platform for achieving all these objectives. So a quick look at how GIRI is going about its business. We have training. We developed with courses with the CITB, specifically targeted on behaviours and culture. We have campaigns. We've had webinars in the UK and Ireland and across in the USA and Australia, and international conferences. There's the IC Learning Hub we relate to, and of course, our relationship with the Supply Chain School. As many of you know, we've been running a number of workshops and webinars, and we've covered a diverse subjects, including the root causes of error, behaviours, culture, carbon and climate change, insurance risk, and design information sources. We also have a knowledge sharing base. Our research is into technology and design. You can find our reports on our website. We're very active in social media, and we provide networking opportunities, particularly at our members' meetings, which we hold 4 times a year. So let's just now look at the benefits. I've talked about the productivity. On the safety front, an Australian study found 37% of accidents occur during rework. So there's plenty of room there for improvement on safety if you're avoiding error. And on sustainability, well, if you're not wasting materials and resources, you're certainly going to improve your carbon footprint. And I think the quality benefits of a get it right approach are manifest. Now, if you've got those all pulling together, then your outcomes are far more predictable, and we're going to have a better reputation industry-wide. So we've got a wide base of membership, clients, contractors, consultants, and supply chain. But we have a key part of our operation is to attract new members from sectors not yet well represented in order to ensure a proper balance when assessing and addressing root causes. So we're now going to have a short video on our training.
Hello, welcome to this short introduction to GIRI, the Get It Right initiative. I'm Nick Francis, and I've been developing some of the training for the initiative. Now, this might seem obvious to you, but the industry has a problem: error, or getting things wrong. A few years ago, some of the major players got together to do something about it. But don't just take my word for it. Let's hear from some of those who are involved in setting up the initiative.
We decided to set up a not-for-profit company at the beginning of 2017 with the main aim of setting up a campaign to avoid error.
We decided that as a group we were going to have a stab at doing something purposeful about it and getting it sorted.
It's supported from the top. It's about the industry working together to solve our problems together.
But why are we worrying about this? Are errors really that much of a problem?
It was shocking to realise that, you know, we were spending as much on error as we were on roads.
I don't think we've got any better at eliminating error now than when I first joined the industry some 50 years ago.
Error's far from just a contractor's problem. Error and error reduction and being part of the Get It Right initiative goes from end to end in the development cycle.
So this is important, and GIRI is supported from the very top right across industry. But this training needs to reach everyone: company leaders, designers, and supervisors and managers on site. Therefore, GIRI have developed 3 streams of training. We've got some for leadership, we've got training for managing interfaces, and training specifically for site supervisors and managers. So let's have a look at these different streams of training. Supervisor and manager stream. This is for the people on the front line to help them understand the root causes of error and what they can do to prevent errors from happening. Interfaces stream. The GIRI research found that poor management of interfaces were a common source of error, both on-site and during design. Leadership stream. Organisation and project leaders have a key role to play, setting the conditions to avoid error. So there you have it. The Get It Right initiative aims to reduce the massive cost of error. It's by industry, for industry, and backed at the very highest level.
I think the best thing about it is the recognition that the industry isn't perfect and that there are so many opportunities for error. If we collaborate to help solve them, it will become a better industry and will produce better buildings.
This will only change if the industry wants to make the change. And by the industry, that has to involve everybody in the industry.
The Get It Right initiative is the construction industry getting together with the aim of eliminating the cost of error.
Before you attend the course, you need to do a short online quiz. This will get you thinking about what errors are, why they happen, and the scale of the problem.
So Nick's referred there to our 3 courses we initially developed with the CITB, and we're now pleased to have a 4th strain, which is the trainer training, and 4 organisations in the industry are now capable of delivering their own training, so we can scale up the coverage across the industry. We've also developed last year a framework tool for a systematic approach to the avoidance of error, which companies can take on and use, and Ema's going to be talking about that a little bit later on today. And picking up on that maturity idea that Rob was talking about, GIRI have now a maturity matrix that you can use in your organisation to measure the improvements as you go down the GIRI path. We communicate widely. We try to deal with the high-profile challenges for the sector. And a group of GIRI members, clients, contractors and consultants collaborated in the creation of the GIRI Design Guide. The guide's applicable to any project, particularly at its commencement, because this is a very early involvement at these very early stages is very crucial to the avoidance of error. So let's just hear about that.
Whatever the scale of a construction project, it's always a joint effort. From the people on site to the clients paying for it, there are multiple stakeholders. And with all these moving parts, it's inevitable that some things will slip through the net, to the tune of billions of pounds. That's how much we estimate is wasted through reworking mistakes on construction projects every year. The Get It Right initiative, or GIRI for short, was set up in 2015 to tackle this problem. Research has shown that avoiding error is about carrying out site instructions properly, so it's vital that the information coming to site is correct, timely and consistent. GIRI has now produced a design guide which identifies procedures that eliminate error further upstream. The guide recommends simple actions, many of which are already embedded in the good practice of design firms. It encourages collaboration within the construction team and a robust approach to creative design and key decision making. And even further upstream, the culture of a project, how it is set up to enable the design and construction teams to collaborate, is also a focus of the guide. It's crucial that a project is well resourced and a thorough design brief is developed. Multiple stakeholders need to be brought together constructively. If projects are put together around the principles of the GIRI Design Guide, this can go a long way to making construction a more rewarding activity. If you want to apply the GIRI design principles, the design guide is free to download from our website, designguide.getitright.uk.com.
Right, well, I'll move on quickly now. The other activities of GIRI, we have a technology group, and we produce 2 further reports which are available in our on our website. We've recognised the problems in the insurance side of the industry, and by liaising with insurers, we're looking at reducing risk and possibly premiums in the future. We've got a steering group that we formed for the Building Safety Act to help people focus on reducing error in the implementation of the new act. We've got a group looking at GIRI metrics, an industry-wide metric. We're working with the CLC so that we can use that specifically to reduce retentions, but it'll be a major help, as was the accident frequency ratio when changing the culture in safety. And we collaborate widely with other quality orientated groups in the industry. So as a conclusion, we need to change the way we work and behave if we're going to have that impact on quality and cost and productivity, and that'll definitely give us a better reputation. So thanks very much for that. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cliff. I'll take over and share my screen again as I pass across to Lyndon. Just bear with me one moment, Lyndon.
No problem.
Yeah, it's prompted me to pick up with yourself, Cliff, and hopefully we can feature some more of the GIRI's excellent resources on the school website, so we can get them in front of more pairs of eyes. So I'll pick up with you on that offline, if that's okay.
That's fine, yep.
Great. Yeah, I'll pass straight across to yourself, Lyndon. Lyndon Hayworth, Head of Assurance at Galliford Try and GT Infrastructure, to share his experience and Galliford Try's experience of working with GIRI, and the learning that you've achieved. Thanks, Lyndon.
Thanks, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. I will try and rattle through this as quick as I can, because I can see Emma is waiting in the wings, ready to get through to the important bit at the end. So we can skip past the sort of introductory slides. That's great. Thanks, Andrew. You can certainly get rid of that one. So back in, I think it was January, when the school first sort of contacted me and said, would GT be interested in sort of presenting today, which we're delighted to say yes. And we were asked to sort of, in a sentence, describe what we were sort of trying to do as an organisation in the sort of quality space, and that's what I wrote. Improving quality through culture, which is obviously closely linked with what GIRI are trying to do, collaboration, trying to get our delivery to be consistent, and always looking at continual improvement. If we fast forward a couple of months, and the next slide, please, Andrew, the GT group actually then started to look at quality objectives, and without my sort of direct input, came out with the 4 headings that you can see on the screen there, of data and reporting, continual improvement, behaviours and culture, and collaboration. So it was, by no means a happy coincidence, I guess, but we actually got some joined up thinking within the business, from the bit of the business that I represent in infrastructure, to the whole group actually sort of thinking along the same lines and using, you know, lots of the same words and terminology in our drive to sort of get things better. And I'm sure if we talk to anybody on the call about quality objectives in their business, those kind of words around collaboration and continual improvement would probably feature with everybody. But the other thing that kind of struck me with, certainly when we looked at the sort of wider heading of today's webinar, which was about measuring, understanding and improving for excellence. Certainly the column on the left hand side, the data and the reporting column, is very much about us trying to understand better where we are as an organisation, and it's something that Rob touched on earlier from a National Highways point of view. I think as an industry probably we don't understand exactly where we are enough of the time, and you know that old adage of if you can't measure it you can't manage it certainly kind of rings true. So we've got quite a bit of work to do in that space in getting better data and understanding, you know, what our issues really are so that we can do something about them. But then I think the next three columns, the continual improvement, the behaviours and culture, and the collaboration, definitely fit into that space of you know, of understanding and improving for excellence. So that's the kind of a little bit of background to where Galliford Try are at the moment. You could just click on for me, Andrew, please. You can just keep going to get rid of that bit of animation. That'd be great. So what I wanted to do, sorry, just go back one. Apologies for that. I'm not going to go through every bullet point because, you know, no one wants to hear all of that. But actually, what really got me thinking was those first key bullet points in each column sort of gave me a framework to actually sort of put through my presentation today, in terms of, you know, the first one in the data sense being what don't we know, the continual improvement being sort of trying to get back to basic principles, then seriously considering how we're going to change our behaviors, and also the collaboration piece and actually listening to feedback to try and work out, you know, how and when we're getting better. So that was the kind of framework that I wanted to talk about over the next sort of couple of slides. Thanks, Andrew. So if we start off with what don't we know, there's a lot of things that we don't know. And I think at some point we just need to sort of open the cupboard and kind of see what falls out. And I think a lot of this revolves around giving people a safe space to actually say what's going wrong in an organization. I think from a safety point of view, we have legal obligations to report certain things. I think when it comes to quality, there's always a temptation to sort of sweep our mistakes under the carpet. One, because we think somebody, whether that's an internal somebody or a client organization, are going to sort of use that as a stick to kind of beat us over the head with. So I think one of the first things that we've got to do is try and create that safe space so that people can openly discuss error and what that error is being caused by, because if we can't do that, we're never going to learn from it. But what we definitely know is that the root causes that Cliff talked about earlier and that we did in the Menti poll, and you know they're listed out again there, is that we're guilty of every single one of those on that list as an organization. You know, to a greater or lesser extent, they all exist in our organization. And I think I would challenge anybody that's on the call today to actually look down that list and think, no, we don't have that, because if you don't, then you're doing extremely well. But I would say you need to have maybe a slightly closer look in the mirror if you don't think any of those things crop up in your organization. But the one thing that we don't accept at GT is that actually there's nothing we can do about it. You know, we can certainly focus on those, and we can sort of drive our behaviors and our skills and actually sort of try and make sure that, you know, we're driving out as many of those as we possibly can and improve as a result. Can you just click on for me, Andrew? And again, and thank you. So when it comes to back to basic principles, within GT, we sort of developed something called our quality wheel. Again, Andrew, if you can just sort of click on for me. Thank you. And basically what that shows us is sort of 6 key fundamental parts of any project, really, from design, plan, collaborate, build, monitor, and report. And again, I'm not going to go into the detail of each one of those bits of the jigsaw, but I think the important thing for me today is to say that actually, you know, this is not like a game of Trivial Pursuit where once you've achieved the design piece, you can kind of forget about it and concentrate on the planning bit. Every bit of this interlinks with the other bits as well. So design, even though that's kind of one discipline, actually features, you know, within lots of the other project areas, and certainly things like planning and collaboration have actually got to go all the way around that wheel, because if they don't, then we're just going to fail right from the get-go. So it's the collaborate piece that I'm just sort of going to focus on next, and that'll lead into what we're trying to do from a cultural change perspective. Thanks, Andrew. So in that collaboration sort of area, what we're trying to make sure that we do is we engage on our projects with the whole team. So that's the project site team, which might come from GT, or it could be our supply chain, and included in that we'll have our design partners and manufacturers. But really importantly, clients and third parties need to come to this as well, because everyone's got a major part to play if we can improve the culture of the industry and basically drive out error. We can't do it just as a contractor or just as a designer. Everybody needs to come together and play their part. And that's one of the areas where the GIRI training that Cliff was sort of mentioning, and that we saw the video with Nick, is been a real focus for us in GT, trying to drive that forward. Just move on for me, Andrew, please. So again, sticking with that kind of same sort of project makeup, if you like, of the project site team, the supply chain, our manufacturers and our clients and third parties, what we've tried to do is really engage in the training streams that have been developed with GIRI, and you can kind of see represented in a Venn diagram. I'm an engineer by background, so I love a Venn diagram. Thankfully, this is one that GIRI produced, and it hits my sweet spot definitely. So, sort of bottom circle, the blue one is the leadership training that was mentioned in the video. The kind of purpley color is the site supervisors and managers training. Again, developed mentioned in the video, and then the kind of browny pinky color is the interfaces training. And actually, as you'd expect from a Venn diagram, the sweet spot is basically where you get to in the middle. That's really when we can start to get it right behavior. And there's a couple of things in there that feature across all the training streams. Understanding the root causes of error, and we've touched on some of those earlier on today. The concept of building something in your brain. How many times have we gone to site and just made a start, whether that's because there's pressure from a client to start, or pressure from our internal people to start early, and actually sometimes we start building things when we're not ready, we haven't done the plan, we haven't even got all the information. So this concept of, have you got enough information to be able to build the thing in your brain, and if you haven't, then don't start. And that's a really important message to get across everybody that's part of that project team. And then the other bit in the middle bit that we're trying to get through in GT is pressing pause to avoid error. I'm sure in everyone's organization we have a culture from a safety point of view where anybody can put their hand up and say, stop, I'm not happy that this operation should continue, there's something that's not safe. The language in quality that we're using is something a little bit softer, but what we're saying is, if you're not sure that something's right, just pause and create a gap between where you're at and moving on, so that we can just question whether something's right or it's not. That gap can be a few minutes, it can be a few days, but rest assured, just creating that ability for any member of the site team to say, I'm not quite sure if this is right, I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to ask a question. It should be something that we encourage everybody to do. We were actually involved in developing the leadership training with GIRI and CITB. So that's where the bulk of our focus has been over the last sort of few years. Andrew, if you could just click on there's a couple of bits of animation I think to come. So over the last sort of couple of years within our infrastructure business unit, we've run 10 leadership events. So 132 people have sat those events. But what we can see is that in the interfaces training and the supervisors and managers training, we're severely lagging behind that. So we've run basically one course in interfaces training and one in supervisors and managers. And that's something that we've recognized we need to put right. I know why it's weighted towards leadership, because we were involved in developing that training, but we really recognize that actually to get to that sweet spot in the middle of the diagram, we need to do all of it. So one of our focuses over the next sort of few months, again, Andrew, if you just click for me, I think it pops up, is we've got a number of events planned between now and the end of June. A lot of those being interfaces training and site supervisor and manager training, because we want to get everybody on our projects kind of understanding and talking that same language around GIRI, and we hope that that will really drive the cultural shift that we're trying to make. And then the last slide, please, Andrew. When it comes to feedback mechanisms, there's lots of different ways we can get feedback, but no better way than to actually just go and talk to people and see how they feel something's gone. And the one in the top left there actually came from one of our leadership courses. I won't read it all, but it's the bit that says it's not dramatic or groundbreaking. It's the simplicity that makes it work. Because basically what leadership training involves is getting client, designer, principal contractor, supply chain in a room for a day and talking about error. How often do we give ourselves the opportunity to do that outside of the training arena? We just don't do it often enough. So it's really simple. It's not rocket science, but actually just sitting there and talking about it really makes a good effect. And then the one down in the bottom right, you know, if you want some honest feedback, ask a site foreman or a works manager just as they're about to go into a training course, which is what we did. And, you know, I'm not going to applaud the attitude before they went into the training, because they were sort of, why do we need to do more training? This is going to be rubbish. That kind of typical attitude that you might get from, you know, the black hats out on site when they think they've got better things to do. But by the first break in the morning, that had sort of started to turn around to say, actually, this is a bit different. This is quite good. And by the end of that training session, it was actually, that's really worthwhile. We need to do more. And there's no better way for me than one of the works managers coming and saying, we need to do more of this, because that's going to get the message out an awful lot better than I can, or Cliff can, or anyone else can. Actually, if we can start drawing and making that demand coming from the project teams, then that's when we're going to be onto a winner, I think. So bit of a whistle stop tour from me, but hopefully I've sort of covered off the main points, and then I think we're going to go over to Emma, who's been waiting in the wings.
We are definitely. Thank you very much, Lyndon. That was superb, great summary, and I was really struck by the having the psychological safety and ability and space to press the pause button. That resonated with me. So really, really interesting stuff. Emma, thanks for being so patient. Emma Monaghan from Graham is the Innovation Director for Graham, also part of the GIRI's strategic leadership team. And Emma, you've joined us kindly to speak about future plans and the GIRI framework. Over to you. You just need to take yourself off mute, Emma.
Thanks. Sorry, Andrew. I thought you were driving everything for me. So Andrew's going to drive the slides for me. I'm going to hopefully whistle through this because I realise we're slightly out of time. So my name is Emma Monaghan. As Andrew says, I'm the Innovation Director with Graham Civil Engineering. I'm a civil engineer by profession and spent quite a bit of my early year on site as part of the resident engineering team. So the introduction of what is now ISO 9001 sounded the death knell for the resident engineering teams, something which even then I knew was a huge mistake. The role of the RE was to focus on quality and safety, that independent set of eyes who insisted on getting it right and doing it safely. And that's all spilt milk now, except that I am possibly encouraged that National Highways, and as Rob has told us, they're looking at this works examiner role. But we used to have these people in the industry. I was and still am a very active and passionate member of the Institution of Civil Engineers. I was fortunate to be elected to council and sat in the best practice group with Ed McCann and others. So we had some fiery discussions in those early days, which ultimately resulted in what has become GIRI, or the Get It Right initiative. And even back then, we knew that to attract the attention of the industry, we would have to talk money. And thus emerged what Cliff has referred to as the early GIRI research into how much poor quality was actually costing our industry. Next slide, please. So indeed, it is all about the money. You've seen this slide earlier, but we were truly shocked when these numbers started coming through, because we knew this was only what some organisations were prepared to share and to admit to, only part of the story. So the true cost could be even more painful. And the shocking truth is, and it's written on the bottom of the slide there, the annual spend due to error is estimated at 7 times the total annual profit of the UK construction industry. And still we pat ourselves in the back when we make between 2.5% and 3% profit. So can you imagine running with that pitch to Dragon's Den? Next slide, please, Andrew. But the truth is that our industry is very complex. It's complicated. Construction projects are complex. They involve huge numbers of people from different teams at different times, often overlapping, each with their own approach, their own way of doing things, their own culture and behaviours. And every time we optimistically believe that this time we will get it right. We're even surprised when we get it wrong. So we keep sticking our mistakes in that too hard to do box, rather than trying to address error by breaking it down into manageable pieces and eating this elephant. Next slide. So it would be easy to blame the site-based delivery teams. Good to have somebody to blame. But in reality, error only manifests in poor quality and poor safety at site level. The truth is that our approach to error started right back at the beginning of our project's life cycle, including the procurement process and indeed the contract conditions. We're all responsible and all accountable. But the good news is that if we collaborate, if we're open to change, if we're willing to try the Geary approach in working together, we can make change happen. So to effectively address error, it is essential to look at the underlying systemic issues. Next slide, please. And you can tell that I have notes here. And more good news is that Cliff and the Geary team have been developing a framework approach to reducing error, which is now ready to be shared and used across the industry. But before we get started, we need to ensure that we have the right enablers in our organisations or collaborative teams. There are 3 enablers. The first, do we have leadership buy-in? So you've heard that already from Rob about how their CEO is driving this, and you've heard it from London on the amount of investment they've had in getting the leadership on board. Without leadership buy-in, Geary will be just another initiative rather than the strategic business transformation that we need. So to address this, Geary recommends the leadership training. Our next slide takes us to the next enabler, which is enabler 2. Have we evaluated the impact of error in our organisation or project teams? We need to ensure that we are tackling the error that is causing the most damage. And to determine this, Geary run an error impact workshop. So as Cliff alluded to earlier, it's not just about being efficient, it's about being effective. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on the right thing. And the third key enabler is, do we have the right behaviours in our organisations or project teams? Do we have the honesty and indeed the humility to admit to our mistakes and then put as much effort into getting it right? So to address this, Geary views the error reduction maturity tool. Next slide, please. So the behavioural psychologist amongst you may already be familiar with the COM-B behavioural model for change. It's new to me. But this suggests that to drive the behaviour B, we need C, capability, both physical and psychological. We need O, opportunity, both social and physical. And we need M, motivation, both reflective and automatic. The Geary team have adapted the COM-B model for our industry use in error reduction, and that will be a whole other issue on its own, so we'll leave that for another day, but you will get the slides so you'll be able to see the detail. I'll draw your attention to the bottom of this slide and the sequence of boxes. Once the 1, 2, 3 of the enabler stages are complete, then we're ready to adopt the Geary approach to error reduction. Next slide, please. The Geary error reduction framework will feel very familiar to any of you who have been through HELMA, Lean, DMAIC processes before. It's about understanding the system and defining the challenge before developing the intervention and trialing it. And then the measure, reporting, and analysing the outcome stage, possibly tweaking and retrialing or abandoning, but starting completely differently, but better informed. As Lyndon and others have said, there is no rocket science in this, but just the rigor of following through on a process and completing each cycle. How often do we fail to learn lessons and embed new ways of working? And it's usually because we haven't fully completed the process cycle. We're off to the next bright, new, shiny challenge. And this is where we really need to ramp up our behavioural maturity, that motivational piece that comes with the COM-B model. Next slide, please. So why bother? You can hopefully make out the quote from my faithful friend Einstein and his definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. We're stuck perhaps in our psychological capability, or perhaps other factors around social opportunities, the lack of support for error reduction strategies in our organisation. And that takes us back to leadership as an enabler. I don't pretend for 1 minute to be a psychologist, but I have been in the industry for over 35 years. I did some maths earlier and they get scary. And my simple observation is that if you want something to change, then you have to change something. We're nearly there. I think I'm on to my last slide. Thanks, Andrew. So what next? Do something, even if you set out to prove Geary wrong. But if Geary proves to be right, we will all be very popular in our organisations. So my challenge to you is to do even just one thing. Maybe find out a bit more or consider a pilot. Invest in that error reduction framework, implement change, reduce error, and bring benefit to you, your business, our clients, our industry, and the public that we serve. My last slide is just about keeping in touch. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Emma, for whistle stop tour and for perfect call to action there at the end of the webinar. Thanks for that. I think the balance has been perfect with yourself and Lyndon, Cliff and Rob, each providing some excellent input throughout the last hour and a quarter. So thanks to all speakers. I am conscious of time, so I'm going to waive the Q&A, if that's okay, in the interests of finishing at 2:15, which is what I promised that we would do. You've got a lot of actions there that speakers have suggested and recommended for you to take. Please do follow up. We'll be providing copies of all of the slides, PDF copies of all of the slides, to all of whom have joined this afternoon's session. We'll also be posting a recording of the presentations, and more information clearly is available. Please use it. Please seek support from Geary stakeholders, from the speakers who've joined this afternoon, and from the school as well. So we'll see you at the next one. Thank you very much for joining. Bye, everybody.